So quick recap before you forget. In the London system, how is you start with pawn to c5 in the hope of winning a free piece after pawn to e5 and dash. O. If they take back with a pawn, you remember to play the improved Dutch with the highlighted moves on the board. Put your last card bishop on b7, castle short, later play knight h5 and pawn to f5. Simple structure, simple system. And if they take back with a queen, instead of that, you chase that queen away with knight c6 and play aggressive chess, queen a5, pop, and pawn to d5. Anyway, up to you guys. And this, by the way, is suitable for those who enjoyed my previous how is defense video where we put the dark squad bishop on f6 and the knight on g6. So if you play e6 on the first move and then your opponent doesn't play pawn to c4, let's say they go knight f3, this is how you can try to continue playing. And against the Colle system, I just recommend you go with the reverse queen's gambit. You go knight c6. And again, don't rush to take on e5 if you may. The move to consider playing in the middle game is knight d7 followed by pawn to f6. You go marching to Zion. Right, welcome back ladies and gentlemen, Casper here. Today I'm going to show you something that you have probably never seen before, and that's reason enough for you to subscribe to this channel if at all you haven't already. So the main area of our meat in today's study is the normal queen's pawn game that begin with the moves d4 and knight f3. In my opinion, this is the most challenging and positional d4 variation. After d4, you will see most advanced players playing knight f6. Why? Because they don't want to show their cards too early and they want to see what their opponent is up to. At this point, you don't know whether white wants to play the accelerated London system or the normal London system or the Colle system or even the queen's gambit. You are not sure. Sometimes what I like doing is playing pawn to e6. Again with e6, I'm just kind of waiting to see what my opponent is up to before I decide what to do next. For example, I like the move e6. After my opponent plays pawn to c4, this is when I go c5, and after d5, I take. After they take, I go pawn to d6. Then say after knight c3, I put my bishop on f6 and my king's knight on g6, a6, pop, bishop g4, take on f3 and all that stuff. This is called the Howie's defense, but just a line that I developed a few months ago. But one move that I find to be challenging in this position is knight f3, a silent move. First, I should mention to say with knight f3, white will one day plant their knight on e5 and limit your piece movements. So after knight f3, again, I don't know exactly what my opponent wants to do, so I just play bishop e7. And if you look into the Lichess database, you will see that bishop f4 is the top played move in this position because it makes sense for white to just develop the bishop out of the pawn chain that is coming. You know that pawn to e3 is also playable. But let's begin with bishop f4, the top played move. Now, this is when I advise to go pawn to c5 because there's a little trap that most of your opponents won't see coming. After the top played move, pawn to e3, I recommend you just go ahead and take on d4. And see this, you guys, the top played move in the Lichess database is knight takes d4, and I'm sure most of your opponents will play this move because they don't want to mess up their pawn structure. I mean, taking with a pawn. But after you see this move, just know you're winning because you have pawn to e5, and white will surely lose one minor piece in this position. Say bishop takes e5 and then you go queen a5 check. Next, you just grab that poor bishop, then later on develop your knight on c6 and all that. Now back on move 3, after bishop f4 and pawn to c5, then white plays e3. Sometimes after cd, you will see them taking back with a pawn, not the knight. But as you can see from the eval bar, things are very much equal. The standard move in this position is knight f6, then you castle short. One thing you might note here is we delay the development of our d pawn because maybe in the near future we might use the d pawn to chase white's knight away from the e5 square. So after e takes d4, what I recommend to do from here is to play a simple system that has no weaknesses at all. Even Stockfish approves. Maybe you will die in the end game, not in the middle game. So your plan will always be as follows. You play knight f6, d6, b6, and put your light squad bishop on b7, your queen's knight on d7, you castle short, and probably go a6 or a5 depending on the situation, and that's it. Why would you want to play b6? Because obviously white is going to castle short, so you want to put more pressure along this diagonal. So you begin with knight f6. Whether white plays bishop d3 or pawn to c3, the top played move, you can start with d6 if you want, or pawn to b6 right away. It doesn't even matter. After bishop d3, now you go bishop b7. Look at how safe this is. Say they castle short, now you go pawn to d6, so your center is very solid, not allowing knight e5 in the near future. Say rook e1, and then you just castle short. Or you can start by playing knight b7. All these moves are equal, by the way. So what this does is it helps you get out of the opening stage safely without having to worry about any unnecessary traps. Moves like a4 can be met with a5 if you're not sure. As I always say, a4 equals a5, h4 equals h5. But here we have something even more interesting, like knight h5. Just trying to get rid of the London bishop. If bishop g3, we just take. If bishop e3, we just retreat our knight back to f6. But you see, this position is too good that even pawn to f5 makes a lot of sense, kind of the Dutch. And in case white sleeps, by the way, with pawn to b4, you just end up trapping their bishop. So just remember this knight maneuver, knight h5 followed by pawn to f5. That's how you begin your attack. This can be thought of as an improved Dutch. If you think about it, your bishop on b7 and your pawn on f5, all controlling the e4 square together with your king's knight. And if you're wondering how you develop your queen, it's through e8, then g6. So that was just a simple plan for you guys. If white takes back on d4 with their e-pawn, but wait a second, what if they don't take back with a knight, or with their e-pawn, say they take back with a queen? Well, this exposes the queen too much, so you just go knight c6, sending that queen back to the kingdom of Babylon. Who are you? Look at yourself. Now you can play moves like queen a5 check, because you just want to dominate the center with all your pawns. Look at this. After bishop g3, yeah, you can even play pawn to e4, so that after knight d4, you simply take before playing d5. Why not playing d5 in this position? White has knight b5 and there's some issues on the c7 square, so use your eyeballs wisely. You want to start by doing this. If queen takes d4, now you go pawn to d5. When last did you dominate on the center like this with your center pawns? c3 is impossible. That pawn is pinned to the king. If pawn to b4, you always have queen d8. There's no c4. We have bishop takes b4 check and all that. Oh, by the way, after playing pawn to d5, it looks like our g7 pawn is a free pawn. Maybe white can take with their queen. Well, this is even worse because you have bishop f6. Oh, by the way, the queen is trapped in Sobibo, just a funny word in my language. If bishop e5, for example, you just take that, and then after this you trap the dark sword bishop in advance. You are going to play king f7 in this position, and there's nothing white can do here. You develop your pieces, probably your knight on e7 to win that poor bishop. So this is a simple line I recommend. After queen takes d4, just go knight c6, and once the queen goes back, instead of playing passive chess, you can also try to be aggressive with, you know, these kinds of moves. Pap, this is coming. You will develop your light squad bishop, probably on d7, even better, and castle short. In the near future, you might want to put your light squad bishop on c6. So quick recap before you forget. In the London system, how is you start with pawn to c5 in the hope of winning a free piece after pawn to e5, and dash O. If they take back with a pawn, you remember to play the improved Dutch with the highlighted moves on the board. Put your last squad bishop on b7, castle short, later play knight h5 and pawn to f5. Simple structure, simple system. And if they take back with a queen, instead of that, you chase that queen away with knight c6 and play aggressive chess, queen a5, pop, and pawn to d5. Anyway, up to you guys. Now, enough of the London system line. After playing bishop e7, by the way, with bishop e7 and pawn to e6, remember, it's not yet clear whether white wants to play bishop f4 or go back to the queen's gambit structure, or probably just go into the Colle system. Once again, if pawn to c4, you always have c5, and after d5, you take, you do that, you put your bishop on f6, just like I demonstrated. Now, one of the most challenging opening variation in the queen's pawn game is the Colle system, just like I said in the introduction of this video, where white plays pawn to e3 instead of developing the London bishop. After this, I have a very simple system I want to recommend for you guys. The Colle system is somehow passive and boring. In my opinion, moves are predictable, as you can tell. The rule of thumb is if white is not interested to play the queen's gambit, you should be the one to play the reverse queen's gambit as highlighted on the board, beginning with the move pawn to d5, assuming you are playing a serious match in the tournament. And after the top played move, as you can see in the Lichess database or in the Masters database, bishop d3, this is when you go pawn to c5, the reverse queen's gambit. Or simply play knight f6 first, stopping pawn to e4, that's a logical move. And after something like knight bd2, which they are taught to play in the Colle to prepare for e4, this is when you go pawn to c5. And the argument is if white goes ahead and plays pawn to e4, you chase that bishop away and take that possible free pawn. After you play c5, the top played move is pawn to c3, just like they do in the London system, so that if you play c4, they have a place where to put their bishop. Now, this is when you go knight c6. So remember to start with your two knights. As you can see, this is just the reverse queen's gambit on our side. Nothing complicated. After white castles short, you also do the same. And now the question that begs to be answered is, how do you continue from here? One simple plan I want to review to you guys is this. We want to allow white to occupy the e5 square with their pawn. We don't mind. We are going to play knight d7 and open the f file by pushing the f pawn to f6 and then do that, or take back with the knight. So just remember, if white plays pawn to e4 somewhere in the middle game, you don't really need to take, because that's what they know. You want to allow them to occupy the e5 square like they do in the French defense, so that you go knight fd7. This is very safe. For example, in this position, white may play rook e1, preparing for this pawn push, or even right now e4, because they know they have too many defenders. They think you're gonna take, and then they take back with their knight. But in this position, you can just simply go queen b6, play something else, allowing them to play e5, so you won't have to deal with this knight e5 pressure. But anyways, once they do this, now you go knight d7, and your plan is to open the f file as highlighted, rook e1 for example. Now you go f6, they will take most likely, and then you take back with a knight while ensuring that your e-pawn is well defended. And here, note how white can't play knight e5, because you just take that free pawn. For example, if this, you have this, that's just a free pawn. If they take, you can take back with your knight and you're up a pawn for nothing with an open position. You will play bishop d6, given a chance, start pushing your pawns. Maybe queen c7 will join the party and all that. Sometimes after you create this reverse queen's gambit structure, after you both castle short, you may see the immediate knight e5. And the idea is if you play queen c7, they might play pawn to f4, turning this into some kind of the stone wall. Or still, I like this idea of keeping tension on the center. So I would play something like knight d7 here. I wouldn't mind, because I want to play f6 next. For example, if pawn to f4, even though f5 is possible and keep the position symmetrical, I would consider playing f6 and just test my opponent's patience, because there is no Greek gift sacrifice here. And I swear most of your opponents are going to sacrifice their bishop, which is bad. You just take, if queen h5 check, you just go back. There is no checkmate or whatsoever. Knight g6 doesn't work. Don't worry about your rook, you're up a piece already. So you just play pawn to f5 to close the position. And if knight takes, you even take back with your other knight to defend everything. If they play knight f3 for example, you even go knight f6, attacking the queen. There's no need to give a check. I mean, that would be a 1-0 move. Maybe queen h3, but again you have knight h7 and everything is under control, and they might be forced to take. But now you take back with your queen and white is just down a piece. So this is to say, after pawn to f6, there is no Greek gift sacrifice. What you don't want is to play symmetrical chess. Your opponent plays the stonewall attack, you also stone them with pawn to f5. That's just too boring. Sometimes they might begin with this move, queen h5, before sacrificing their bishop. But you see, if you see there's too much tension on the king side, you just close the position and there's nothing that white has. They might try rook f3 with an intention to do that. You just go knight back to f6, and they better play queen h3 not to run into any discoveries. And now there is this other interesting bishop maneuver beginning with bishop d7. Let white decide what they want to do with their knight on e5. By the way, it's their most active piece. Say rook g3. They like attacking. Now you can take. If they take back, you even have knight e4. These taking back with a d pawn looks safe to my eyeballs. I don't see anything in this position. I mean, it's just a normal game at the end of the day. So you allow white to occupy the e5 square, but you don't take towards the center. You want to play knight d7. This is the new strategy I'm showing you guys, just to keep everything simple and avoid any traps. And this, by the way, is suitable for those who enjoyed my previous how is defense video, where we put the dark squared bishop on f6 and the knight on g6. So if you play e6 on the first move and then your opponent doesn't play pawn to c4, let's say they go knight f3, this is how you can try to continue playing. And against the Colle system, I just recommend you go with the reverse queen's gambit. You go knight c6, and again, don't rush to take on e5 if you may. The move to consider playing in the middle game is knight d7 followed by pawn to f6. You go marching to Zion. Right, now time for you to go and check out my new e5 defense course, which I have also linked in the comment section down below. And I'm glad to say so far it has received a lot of attention and people are getting it like crazy. So it's an opening response that you try against white's e4 opening. You're going to learn how to play against the Scotch, the Royal Pace, the Bishop's opening, 3 Knights opening, the 4 Knights game, the Vienna game, even the Italian game. So it's the complete e5 defense course that I just launched with my team. You better go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.